Welcome to week 18. Last week, we had talked about why we teach in small groups and how to think about whether a student can actually access and benefit from group instruction. And this week, we're moving into the how. How do you actually help a group run successfully when you've got several students, you have different goals, you have different materials, you have different levels of support, and approximately two hands? So, unless you're an octopus, teaching in a group can be difficult. Depending on your classroom and your role, you might be supporting a group that the teacher is leading, or once you've had some experience and direction from your teacher, you may be asked to run a small group yourself. Either way, the skills that we're talking about this week really do apply. Here's the big idea. Working with a group is not the same thing as doing 4 one-to-ones at the same time. There are actually a few different arrangements that you might see when working in a small group. You might truly be working one-on-one with a student, and obviously that's not a group setting. That's just the one-on-one that we've talked a lot about. You might also have several students with you, but you're actually only teaching one student at a time while the others are engaged with reinforcement and independent activities. This happens a lot in your high support classrooms or your ABA classrooms, where you might be assigned 2 or 3 students at a time, but the students are not capable yet to really access learning in a group setting. They really, in order to access learning, need that one-on-one attention. And so you might be working individually with one student while you have the other student or students doing independent, just recreational type activities to keep them occupied. And then you rotate around. Then you might also be running or supporting actual group instruction where several students are participating and learning at the same time with the same content. Even within that group, you might be teaching a group with students with lots of different skill sets. So you'll be modifying and accommodating them, or you might have a group where everybody's working on the same goal. So there's lots of different configurations on running group settings. And it's not just social groups, it can be academic groups. Recess time is a great time to do kind of group activities, or indoor recess is a great time to do these. A group is just really a time where students are learning something with additional peers around them. This reminds me of something that we used to do. I think I mentioned it before when we had high support classrooms or ABA classrooms and students who had high support needs. Each student would have a document box, and within that box, it would have all of their goals. A lot of these would be goals that they were working on individually one-on-one, but they'd also have their social goals and materials in there, as well as communication methods and visuals and stuff like that. We trained our staff to be working in a group setting, but really individual with the student. Every student would have their individual box there with access to their reinforcements or their independent goals, their file folders, whatever there were. And the pair would be taught to work specifically, taking data, working on a goal with this student here. And these other students, she'd have out their reinforcement or independent work going here. And it takes a little bit of practice to be able to make sure you're monitoring the needs of the students who are doing independent work and staying engaged in what they're doing, but also focusing on the student that you're actually taking data on and working learning goals on. Before you start your group, try the best you can to have some of those preparations done beforehand so that once you sit down, you can engage the ones you're going to have in reinforcement. They've already sat down, they're ready to do that, and you have your materials out for the first one that you're going to do learning goals with. And that's the best way to do that, to not be kind of frantically trying to figure out what you're doing next. That preparation really does make a difference because the adult, you're not always stopping instruction to hunt down the puzzle or to find the worksheet or grab somebody's reinforcer, figure out what's next. You already have that prepped up and ready to go. So that's one of our themes this week. A good group often starts before the students even sit down. So know who's coming and what they're working on, have their AACs or visuals available, have the adapted materials available, know the behavior and support plans that you need to follow, and then know what your role is in that group. Are you leading the group? Are you supporting the teacher in the group? Do you have one particular student that you really need to keep an eye on? Be prepared for all of that before the group actually starts. Because once that group starts, you probably know this, your attention has to go to the students and not to searching through cabinets and trying to figure out what's going on next. I used to love running preschool circle time because in the high support classrooms where you'd only have 3 to 5 students at a time, but they were high support needs, which is why. And so I love doing these because I'm sure you've seen those cube chairs for the littles. I love those because there's a little bit more contained for them. And so I would have them all sitting down in the chairs, and I would either be on a very small stool or just simply sitting on the floor in front of them. And this is when I became an octopus, but I would have all of my materials ready, all the music prompts and everything ready. And I was basically at arm's length for everybody in the group. so that I'm asking one person a question here, but I'm over here like patting the knee of somebody over here who needs a little attention, or I'm giving a prompt visual to this one while I'm helping this one participate in a different way. I just loved having them right here and be able to giving visuals back and forth and having them participate in such a way that they were starting to cross those body boundaries, which is where they were, is just basically crossing boundaries with each other. And so I tell you the story just because you're going to need to get creative with whatever learners you have to create an environment that they respond to. And so even when I had a bunch of these little teeny kids with different support needs and different skill sets, I was always aware of who was where. I'd have my paras sitting right behind and being able to support from behind so they could participate as much as possible with me. So just thinking about whatever students you have in a group, where their skill set is, and how you modify and accommodate things to get everybody's needs met in that group. Because when you're running a group, you're not just delivering a lesson, you're really watching the whole room. You're thinking, who's engaged, who's starting to wander, who needs a visual, who's waiting, who can do this independently, where do I need to position myself? What's coming next? You're constantly asking all of those questions, and you really do need to become a bit of an octopus in order to do that. Hopefully, you're just a prepared octopus in order to be most successful. That's where one of the biggest differences between one on one instruction and group instruction comes in, and that is where your attention goes. In one to one instruction, it's pretty easy. You only have one student, you give an instruction, you watch the response, you provide reinforcement or feedback, and you decide what happens next. In a group, you're constantly making decisions. Who needs me right now? And just as importantly, who doesn't need me right now? If Maya's participating independently, we don't need to jump in just because we're standing next to her. But maybe there's a typically developing peer who's right next to her who needs a little extra prompt or love as well. Feel free to do that as long as the student that you're supporting is doing what needs to be done. But never feel bad about stepping back if a student is independent, and feel free, as long as you're in agreement with your teachers, that you can support other students regardless if you're assigned to them or not. Different students can be in the same group and still have different goals, different materials, different response options, and different levels of support. That's not a problem with the group. It's really just good differentiation. One way to think about where your attention should go is first, safety, second, access, third, instruction, and fourth, independence. So safety always comes first. If there's a student who is in any sort of crisis, or there is any risk to safety to self or others or even property, we need to make sure we're attending to that immediately. The second thing is access. Can everybody actually access what's happening? Do they have their AAC or visuals? Do they have their materials? Can they participate? If not, we need to go back to our teacher and say we're not able to access the learning in this situation. And then who needs instructional support? Do they need additional help in learning a skill that maybe they're going over in group? Do we need to make sure that they have that skill in a one-on-one setting so that they can practice it in a group? And again, that's something you could talk to your teacher about. And then finally, who is already doing okay independently? Where can we step back and pull support away from and help support other students who may need the support? Sometimes we're so focused on helping students succeed that we accidentally become part of what they need in order to succeed. So our goal is for the students to participate with the least amount of adult support that they can. Let's also talk about a little bit about what happens when a behavior occurs during a group. One student's difficult moment doesn't necessarily have to become the entire group's difficult moment. Check for safety as always, follow that student's plan, and coordinate with your other adults. So when appropriate, keep the rest of the group moving. And sometimes you have to get a little creative in how to do this. Sometimes you need to move the group subtly to a few steps this way and let maybe a student who's in a meltdown have a few moments in a quiet area themselves. Just get creative and make sure that safety is always a priority. I want to make an important connection here. These same skills apply when you're supporting a student in a general education classroom. In that situation, the classroom teacher is leading the group, so whenever possible, defer to the teacher's instruction. Your job isn't to become a second teacher sitting next to the student, giving a second set of directions. Try to be discreet. Follow the student's plan and make sure they have access to what they need, and wait before stepping in. I always taught my paras that when they're in a general education classroom, as questions or situations arise, as much as possible, we would have them direct something to the teacher. So if a student had a question about where do I find the pencils or something, as much as possible, we would redirect them to the teacher of the classroom and only have the para step in when it really needed to be individualized support. So something that the other peers in the classroom might need help from the teacher, try to remember to redirect your student to the same thing. As much as possible, reorienting your student that you're supporting within your general education classroom to be doing as much as the other students are doing wherever their skill set is. Because as much as we can, we don't want the student attending to the para while everybody else is attending to the teacher, if we can avoid that. We definitely don't want to accidentally create a little one-to-one classroom inside a general education classroom. We're supporting the students' access to the group. We're not replacing the group. One of the other things we'll do this week is collecting very simple data during groups. Sometimes you're going to be supporting several students and managing materials and following support plans, helping with transitions and stuff like that. Sometimes somebody hands you a clipboard and says, hey, don't forget the data. So we're going to try to keep that practical too, make sure that data collection is as simple as possible. Whenever data is too complicated or too cumbersome, make sure you're communicating that with your teacher. But as always, try not to generate data that you didn't directly observe. If for some reason you weren't able to gather data you were supposed to in the day, communicate that with your teacher and don't try to recreate it at a later time. It will help if you, before this group starts, know what you're watching for. So review your data sheet and what the goals are and how you're supposed to be collecting it. If you have any questions, make sure you ask that before group starts. You don't have to record everything that everybody does. That's just unrealistic. But know the target, know what counts, have your data sheet ready, collect when you're supposed to collect it without letting the clipboard become the most important member of the group. Throughout this week, keep coming back to this question. What does this student actually need from me right now? Maybe they need my support or a prompt. Maybe they just need you to step back a little bit and let them try. So prepare your octopus arms and let's get started with week 18, running successful small groups.